I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume, so I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. We continue reading in the Gospels. This is right near the end. Christ is still in he's now in the town that is called Ephraim, which means he's kind of halfway between, he's in Samaria, I believe. Halfway between Galilee and Jerusalem. Ephraim, this would be where the tribe of Joseph was, or the tribes of Joseph, the tribe of Ephraim. So he'd be in the Samaritan area. That's where he's staying. But now, as we read, it is 2 days before the Passover. And the Passover is when he is crucified. So we're right at the end. The last thing we read was the conspiracy of the Jews seeking to kill him. They don't want to arrest him on the feast day, but they have a proclamation out that anybody who knows where he is needs to tell them so that they can arrest him, and they're trying to arrest him secretly so as to not rouse the ire of the people. That's where we left it, and in this video we will now again read in Matthew, Mark, and John, and we will read them in that order. In this video we have a Joseph Smith translation. And what the Joseph Smith translation is, this is a translation or correction done by Joseph Smith to restore those passages that have been lost or corrupted over the years. Matthew chapter 26, verses 6 through 16. Now when Jesus was in Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, there came unto him a woman having an alabaster box of very precious ointment, and poured it on his head as he sat at meat. But when his disciples saw it, they had indignation, saying, To what purpose is this waste? For this ointment might have been sold for much and given to the poor. When Jesus understood it, he said unto them, Why trouble ye the woman? For she hath wrought a good work upon me. For ye have the poor always with you, but me ye have not always. For in that she hath poured this ointment on my body, she did it for my burial. Verily I say unto you, wheresoever this gospel shall be preached in the whole world, there shall also this, that this woman hath done, be told for a memorial of her. Now here we are not given the woman's name, but she comes in, this is again 2 days before the Passover. We're right there. And she comes in, she anoints Christ's head with this ointment. And whether she understands it or not, she is being moved by the Holy Spirit to do this. And Christ is saying she is doing this in preparation for my death, for my burial. And when it says the apostles had this indignation that they said we should have sold it and given the money to the poor. It was very valuable. But Christ said, you've got the poor, you can help the poor any day. They're always here. I'm not always here. So to show me the veneration and worship while I'm here is a good thing. And I love the promise there. No matter wherever the gospel is preached, there will be the memorial told of this woman. And it is true, we have it in the Bible. From as early as the 2nd century, the story has been written down and taught wherever the Christian religion has spread. Let us look at the Joseph Smith translation here. In verse 7 at the end, it's instead of as he sat at meat, it is as he sat in the house. In verse 8, it now reads, And when some saw this, they had indignation, saying, Unto what purpose is this waste? In verse 10, it now reads, When they had said thus, Jesus understood them, and he said unto them, Why trouble ye the woman? In verse 11, says, For the poor you have always with you, but me you have not always. Makes that flow much better grammar there. And in verse 12, we take out a number of words, so it's now, For she hath poured this ointment on my body for my burial. And then in verse 13, we have this addition at the beginning now says, And in this thing that she hath done, she shall be blessed. For verily I say unto you, wheresoever this gospel shall be preached in the whole world, this thing that this woman hath done shall also be told for a memorial of her. But there is this interesting one here, back at verse 10. As I mentioned in some other videos, there are 2 different manuscripts for the Joseph Smith translation, and they're not exactly the same. So in verse 10 has an alternate translation in the 2nd manuscript, and it says here, And when they had thus reasoned among themselves and understood not, Jesus knowing their hearts, he said unto them, Why trouble you the woman, and from whence is this evil in your hearts? For verily I say unto you, she hath wrought a good work upon me. So they were misunderstanding that. They were thinking, Christ always saying, take care of the poor, give your alms, sell all and give to the poor and follow me. And now this woman's coming with an expensive ointment. And they're reasoning to themselves, well, didn't Christ say we should sell all and give to the poor? Why hasn't she sold this? And Christ is correcting him, says, no, you're not looking at the principle properly. But now we're going to read this again in Mark chapter 14, verses 3 through 9. And being in Bethany, in the house of Simon the leper, as he sat at meat, there came a woman having an alabaster box of ointment of spikenard, very precious. And she brake the box, and poured it on his head. And there were some that had indignation within themselves, and said, Why was this waste of the ointment made? For it might have been sold for more than 300 pence, and have been given to the poor. And they murmured against her. And Jesus said, Let her alone. Why trouble ye her? She hath wrought a good work on me. For ye have the poor with you always, and whensoever ye will, ye may do them good. But me ye have not always. She hath done what she could. She is come aforehand to anoint my body to the burying. Verily I say unto you, wheresoever this gospel shall be preached throughout all the whole world, this also that she hath done shall be spoken of her for a memorial of her. Really nothing new there. Some of it's in a slightly different order, but it's all exactly the same thing. So I don't think we need to really make much comment on Mark. But let us look at the Joseph Smith translation of Mark. In verse 3, it now says, And Jesus being in Bethany, and at the end where it says, poured it on his head, it is now poured the ointment on his head. In verse 4, it now says, There were some among the disciples who had indignation. In verse 6, it says, Now, and Jesus said unto them, Let her alone, why trouble ye her? For she hath wrought a good work on me. In verse 7, we remove the first four off of the verse, and then the ye, whensoever ye will, ye may do good, is now you. Whensoever you will, you may do them good. Now verse 8 is a little bit more profound here. We now have this. She has done what she could, and this which she has done unto me shall be had in remembrance in generations to come, wheresoever my gospel shall be preached. For verily she has come beforehand to anoint my body to the burying. And then we get 9. Wheresoever this gospel shall be preached throughout the whole world, what she hath done shall be spoken of also for a memorial. It's a nice little addition. It's not real profound, I guess, but it's a nice little addition. Now we turn to John. John chapter 12, verses 1 through 11. Then Jesus, 6 days before the Passover, came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, which had been dead, whom he raised from the dead. There they made him a supper, and Martha served, but Lazarus was one of them that sat at the table with him. Then took Mary a pound of ointment of spikenard, very costly, and anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the odor of the ointment. Then said one of the disciples, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, which should betray him, Why was not this ointment sold for 300 pence and given to the poor? This he said not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief, and had the bag, and bare what was put therein. Then said Jesus, Let her alone. Against the day of my burying hath she kept this. For the poor always ye have with you, but me ye have not always. Much people of the Jews therefore knew that he was there, and they came not for Jesus' sake only, but that they might see Lazarus also, whom he had raised from the dead. But the chief priests consulted that they might put Lazarus also to death, because that by reason of him many of the Jews went away and believed on Jesus. John gives us a lot more detail here, and that is, we have now who the woman is. This is Mary, the sister of Martha. Who had indignation? It was Judas Iscariot. Why? Because he had the bag, meaning he was in charge of the finances. He was the treasurer of the group, and he was embezzling money. He was skimming off the top. That's why he wanted her to go and sell it, because then he could steal a little bit of it, possibly all of it. But see, Judas, just like all the apostles, they all thought that Christ was going to be a political leader, come to throw off the yoke of Rome and establish a earthly kingdom, renewing the throne of David. And the 12 were thinking they were going to be his ministers, his princes. The rest of them are still following him. They're not quite sure what's going on. They don't know how it's going to work out. That's still what they're hoping for, but they're putting their trust in Jesus. Judas is getting impatient, and he is stealing the money. He wants the influence and the power that comes with being a minister of state, and he wants it now. He's getting impatient. That's what's going on. Now, at the end there, it also states that many people were coming out to see Lazarus because of the miracle. Now, this happened only about a month earlier. It was like a month ago that Christ raised him from the dead. So a lot of people are going out to see Lazarus. And when they see him and they hear his testimony, they're believing in Christ. And so now the Jews are saying, well, we can't just kill Christ. We got to kill Lazarus because he is testifying of Christ. Now, there is that discrepancy here in that this, in Matthew and Mark, this comes at about 2 days before the Passover. And in John, it is 6 days before the Passover. I tend to think that this actually was about 6 days before. This is about a week before the Passover. And it is just kind of inserted here by Matthew and Mark as something that happened in this time frame. But John probably has the timing more correct than the other two. Now, let us look at the Joseph Smith translation here in John. Verse 7 now reads, "Then said Jesus, Let her alone, for she hath preserved this ointment until now, that she might anoint me in token of my burial." John seems to have less corrections than any of the other Gospels. But this would indicate that Mary at least understood, or as I said, I don't know if she understood or if she's just being moved by the Spirit, but it is in preparation of his crucifixion. But we're going to leave that here, and now we are going to enter into the final week of Christ's mortal ministry in our next readings, one Gospel at a time. So I will see you there.